guys, welcome back. For those of you that don't know, I am a psychic medium as well as I cover astrology. And I wanted to cover this mainly in two parts. Now, one part is relating to the birth chart of Travis Scott and what potentially can happen. And then I stepped back and I looked at the energy, and it did need to be dealt with in a very sensitive manner due to the fact that the incident did cause harm to individuals. So I had to be really disconcerting about how I was going to do this video due to the sensitivity of these circumstances. Now, this video is going to cover both what is in his chart, and yes, that can change due to the circumstances of what is going on right now, I do move through into that and show you the charts. And very interestingly, I'm really now further digging when I am looking at the astrology aspects. I have actually pulled the chart up of really where the aspects were on the day of the incident. We did have the sun in Scorpio. We also had moon in Scorpio, Mercury in Scorpio, Venus in Capricorn, Mars in Scorpio. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because when I saw Travis in the media, number one, we had the South Node in Sagittarius, and it was for about 2.5 years. That was really linking to musicians, spirituality. We saw a lot of that breaking down in the collective. And what happens is when we have a North and a South Node in astrology, it means we've become comfortable in that energy and something is transforming. And definitely with flights, with travel, with religion and values, what other areas? And we move towards the North Node of Gemini. Now, what happens with the North and the South Node is it doesn't completely go. It gets directly transformed through that process. And because we are moving to eclipse season, which is Taurus, which is coming up, I believe, really linking from the 17th moving to the 19th, that's going to be shifting. That's going to be our next North Node. Those subjects are coming up simultaneously of us cycling out the previous nodal energies, which is Sagittarius and Gemini. So let's have a brief look at Sagittarius. Like I mentioned, spiritual gurus, religion, we had a lot of that coming up, race, travel, trade, journalism, a lot of that, especially for YouTubers. It did change in the way we were doing things. It was being restructured. Musicians, sports stars, we saw a lot of passings of sports stars, and yes, that can come through again, which is a bit of a concern. Now, because we're moving towards the eclipse next month in Sagittarius, those themes were already coming through. And I'm just trying to look where there's any Sagittarius. Not yet. Okay. The other thing is we did just have the new moon in Scorpio, and Travis Scott actually has Scorpio placements in his chart, which I do discuss further in this video. The other thing is because we had on that day such heavy hitting Scorpio placements, they were linking to various areas in his chart. The other thing is that with Taurus, it's currently in the planet Uranus and Taurus. It's in retrograde currently, and we are moving to that eclipse in Taurus. There is also Taurus placements in his chart. Now, being that it's in the placement of Uranus and Taurus, it links to old and young. And so especially next year, we will have subjects really to do with the younger generation, the older generation, trying to merge such. We can have things to do with finances and Bitcoin and the economy and food, all of those things. So I knew in some sense in his chart, especially because he had Taurus there, that he was an innovator, okay? So by no means am I having attachment to either side. I'm merely explaining A, the aspects, and B, some of the things that were in his chart and how and why potentially it occurred on the day. Now, navigating these situations, there were, from what we have heard in the media, younger and older energies inside of these situations. And remember, when we have the South Node in Sagittarius, it wasn't doing the right thing, okay? It was the old way of doing things. So in society, we saw this happening over the last few years. There was a lot to do with inequality, subjects to do with culture, where it was split, and we did tend to get to that North Node in Gemini, and Gemini is about education, school, seeing another person's perspective, being open-minded, having to deal with your businesses in a local sense, where you suddenly had to work from home potentially. So there were those transformations going on. So one experience I can see happening in this chart, as well as what has most recently happened, is with these nodal effects, and especially because it's going to be an ending of doing something in one way and a brand new beginning, and it transitions over. Those subjects were coming up to do with older and younger. And so again, at this, and Uranus tends to go, right, we're going to change this. We're going to change this up, and it's uncertainty. So it's interesting how we have the subject to do with Bitcoin coming up, where yes, there can be fluctuations, there can be changes, there can be growth, which I'll do a video on that later. So what I'm seeing from this is, yes, at the concert there were younger and older energies at this concert. And again, Sagittarius South Node is, now that that has occurred, it is going to change the industry to a degree, because it's going to change the way that it actually structures concerts, musical events and things to that degree. The interesting thing is Travis Scott has Saturn in Aquarius, which again is the social responsibility of wider groups, and we can get into that deeper and see how that's going to pan out. The other thing is, I knew that because he had Taurus placements, he really had his hand in different pies, astrologically, in the food industry, in the musician industry, and more of that can come as we move forward, depending on how the outcome is going to go for him. But I do really see between now and next year, there is going to be changes, but he can really move towards maybe even, these circumstances and the way they play out, they do change a human being. So we see the negative polarity initially, and then the transformation of such, it can be a brand new polarity that comes through on the opposite side of the spectrum, and how these things are done. Okay, what I am saying is, and this was a real bizarre experience, digging into the astrology, because we can tend to look back to previous states of when we had eclipses in those nodes, ending those cycles. And I always say it's a little bit like when we are going from one nodal effect to the other, we're getting both combinations simultaneously happening. Now, we did have Mercury retrograde in October, and it was in the house of Libra. Next year we're going to have similar aspects coming up, but they're going to be different. The other thing I can say is we had Mars in Libra, and it's in its detriment. So a lot of us would have felt very tired, and there could have been some confusion, especially if the event was directly structured around that time. The other thing I can say is, with the location of where it happened, what I'm seeing is, it's strange. I looked back to, obviously, with his connection to the Kardashians, very similar. 2014, I'm shaking the desk. 2014, there was the case with O.J. Simpson. And, surrounding the family, there's always, we go backwards, we go forwards in astrology. And uniquely enough, to my belief, it is Kim Kardashian that actually did pass her bar. Now, I don't know whether that's going to be, she's going to advise. I don't know. I feel somehow the family will be linked in this circumstance, but it'll be interesting to see how this actually plays out, especially because Kim, I believe, is a Libra. I'll have to look at her chart and see what's coming up there. But we're going to get into this video in a minute, and I'm going to put something on the screen, and we're going to have a bit of a chat about what I see, and then we're going to get into the other side of the video, which was where I hadn't looked at anything of it, and I was mainly just discussing the frequency surrounding his chart as per se. So by no means is it an insensitivity to the circumstances. It's mainly a non-egoic way of observing a person's chart, and now then cross-referencing, linking to what is coming up with the astrology, what was happening on the day, and how we can directly look at it in a very partial way. My absolute love to the people during that process. Now, let's get into it. Okay, now from a financial point of view, we are going to look at the astrology of this particular circumstance. And generally, when it does come to adding or reduction of finances, we tend to look at the second house, the eighth house, and the seventh. He does have Jupiter and Virgo. That's really linking to his second house, which does mean when he is organizing social settings, he will really cast a very critical eye on it to get the devil in the detail correct. Also, we did just move away from a Mercury retrograde in Libra. Again, really going back to what went on and whether the event was, organized correctly. There could have been some confusion around the time, particularly with how it was, where it was going to be. Okay, that's one thing I will say. The other thing is because he does have a lot of eighth house placement, that's both Mars and Scorpio. We do have that as a link there too within his chart. So yes, there is a potential. He's also got both Saturn and Lilith in Aquarius. So that is the connection to the second, the eighth, and the seventh. So there will be a potential loss of finances. Separately, it can directly affect contracts, although moving into 2022, almost the outcome of these things can be delayed until that time. We are going to have a Venus retrograde in Capricorn. So when it does come to what went down and how it went down, I'll also describe really what those scorpionic placements can bring through, both with the way it was run, potentially the security, very eighth house placement, Mars as well. Mars is currently in Scorpio. So it's really with the people that on the other side of the fence that were dealing with it, what some of those shadow effects could have been. Now, interestingly, there were statements that were made to do with an accusation, allegation, and again, this is for entertainment purposes only, based on astrology and how you can actually look at astrology and use it. One is Scorpio is eighth house placement. Now, Scorpio can relate to a culture of a human being. Especially in Babylonian astrology, we can link it to a particular genre of where that person was born, the culture, the identity. The other thing is it can link to births, deaths, legacies, inheritances, tax, debt, intimacy, the deed, so to speak. I'm speaking in code on YouTube. The other thing can be poisoning. And toxins, it can be an altered state of being, so to speak, and especially because we do have Uranus and Taurus, that social energy, especially surrounding his chart, that's where he is quite an innovator with his art, and it is quite taboo in society because it's a new and old, it's a forming of, I thought it was interesting that he had, the genre and the way he had moved with his art, so to speak, was quite out there. That's very Uranus and Taurus. It's a new way of bringing things through. We'll get into that further. But yes, the speculation surrounding potential people collapsing, it could have been through toxins. And yes, that will be yet to be seen. Also, the way it was managed. The other thing we can look at is, Mars is happy in Scorpio and Aries, although it is very rushed. But again, considering he does have natally Jupiter in Virgo, when he is an absolute perfectionist when it does come to the devil in the detail of those circumstances. So it's yet to be seen how that goes and what will play out. Now, the other area we'll get into will be whether this person may potentially have a sentence for them. We'll get into that now. Okay, now this is for entertainment and based on astrology only, and it is not legal advice, as a disclaimer. Now, this is going to cover the big question is, could this person possibly experience lockup? And the answer to that question is a possible yes. Yes and no, depending on what the outcome of the really the surrounding circumstances were. The reason is, and we'll probably know a little bit more between now and next year. But the other thing is there can be a turn of events really around the eclipse next month. The reason is because in his 12th house, you tend to get with the house of what we deem as, going in, is the 12th and the 8th house. Now, Yes, you can connect in the second house as well. What I am seeing through the chart is he does have quite heavy hitting Scorpio placements. And again, both with Venus gearing up ready to go retrograde towards December. We also have that there sitting there and in Capricorn until March, I believe. So there's this huge area surrounding Pluto, which is currently in the house of Capricorn, which is very Scorpionic in nature, and the house of Scorpio that he does have in his natal chart. Now, the hardest part in this factor is the fact that he does have his North Node in Capricorn. And at the moment, really from about the end of 2019, where we had the Great Conjunction, I believe, it could have been 2020, but I'm pretty sure it was 19, we have been cycling out Pluto in Capricorn. Now, we did in the initial stages feel that with Saturn and Jupiter moving into Aquarius, it was going to alleviate some of those Capricornian energies coming through with Pluto. But because it is reaching its higher degree as it transitions out and moves towards 2023 ending, it is becoming a little bit more malefic. So it is becoming complicated for those that have Capricorn in their chart. It doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing, but it can become a bit more complicated. And it is in the house of Pluto, which is births, deaths, endings, and resurrections. Do I think this person can transform? Yes, with Pluto, there it is transformations nevertheless. But as to what is going to happen with it, because we had Venus in Capricorn, it was to do with our social activities. So I'm going to look back at the chart. We had Venus in Capricorn, which was very Pluto in nature. And again, because a lot of us hadn't been socializing, the excitement of Scorpio came through, Sun and Scorpio wanting to get in there. The other thing is with Neptune and Pisces, next year we're having Jupiter and Pisces. We're needing to be very mindful of our mind, body, soul, to be cautious with toxins, to be careful with, what we're doing moving forward and find that balance. But that social energy is going to come back. So that was also a potential cause of chaos during that time. Again, with the South Node in Sagittarius, the North Node in Gemini, there were a lot of restrictions. And then amplified to that hunger to have that freedom, really connecting with someone that you directly resonate with, which were the patrons at the concert. It has been this collective consciousness of the sheer frustration of wanting to be connected to other individuals, and that's Scorpio. So that again was to the detriment of the circumstances at that time due to feeling so very restricted. Now, possible outcomes of this, I do see at a further stage, I do see him potentially doing, how could I explain it? Fundraisers, things to do with youth, different ways to navigate these circumstances. That can be in the aftermath. But I do see on the opposite side of the spectrum, because we do have Venus in Capricorn, it will also be government-related subjects where it can be they're looking at different ways that they can legislate things, different ways and codes can come in, and especially with the South Node being in Sagittarius, these were circumstances when it did come to trade, travel, social, sporting events. We saw the Olympics occur. All of these things have transformed now. And so yet again, on this occasion, with the pending eclipse in Taurus, these circumstances, collectively, we're going to see a lot of things to do with Taurus coming up. And at the moment, Taurus can link to the economy, money, values, social activities, environment, Bitcoin. So these circumstances will be in the media, as well as, again, young and old. Uranus is in Taurus, which relates to the old way, the new way, the younger generation, the older generation, health, well-being. These things are coming up. So we will see how this pans out. I may later do an update. By no means do I, this is for information content only. That's really the reason I did this from an astrological point of view. We'll get on to the next part of the video. Now, the next part of the video, as I mentioned, was done really away from the scenes of knowing completely what went down. So it is this real deep dive into what I can see in his chart. What are some potentials? Now, obviously, with some of the predictions and the astrology that I mention in this, It is open to change, and that will be due to the outcome that is pending. Now, yes, I do see potentially there can be a lot of shifts for his zodiac sign inside his astrology chart in 2022. I also do see a potential of marriage. And I do see, at the moment, a bit of risk around him, and that can be with his health and well-being. The other thing can be with the outcome of how this is going to go. I do see at the end of this, although this has been a very devastating circumstance, it is going to cause change, which is very sad, but again, absolutely necessary. We will get into this, but as a disclaimer, if you are sensitive and this is going to hurt, don't watch the video, okay? This is from a non-egoic placement of observing a birth chart and looking at the aspects and potential things that can come through for this individual, both within the career, future tense moving into 2022, and what I'm physically seeing from it. Love and light. Take care. Hi guys, welcome back. We're here to look at Travis Scott's astrology chart, and yes, I will be tuning in psychically. I thought it was really interesting the other day, and this is pretty different for me, which I did say for a while I was going to do, you know, themes that are coming up, definitely astrology charts of people that are in the media, and this was one that I really had the template for, but really hadn't done. Another one I am going to be doing is relating to Britney Spears and her father, because I know it's going to be coming up again in the media because he has heavy Capricorn placements. Now, when I looked at the themes surrounding Travis Scott, I thought it was two things that I picked that were really large, and I am going to have the astrology chart up on the screen, and we will have a look at that. And we will talk about it deeper as to what I can see happening in his life moving forward. Now, okay, what I am seeing is we do have a lot of transits coming up at the minute that are really hitting his natal chart. And I really did think that was going to be a possibility when he was on the media. Number one, we have had the South Node in Sagittarius, and it is to do with musicians. It is to do with, you know, travel, long distance travel, spirituality. So I knew he was going to have Sagittarius somewhere in his chart, as well as Taurus and Scorpio placements, which he does. And I mean, we all do have 12 houses in our chart, but I knew he'd have some pretty close hitting aspects due to the fact he was in the media. Now, for a lot of musicians and artists collectively, you know, being in the South Node meant there was no real forward movement, and it was this rebirth. We were doing things differently, definitely opened the doors for different people, and so too I can see it really occurring inside Travis Scott's chart. Also, his nodal energy is coming up in an axis at the moment, which will be very unique for him. And I do believe I'll put the exact dates up on the screen of when these transits happen and when this can be moving forward through to 2022. We are going to be having Venus retrograde in Capricorn, and it is hitting his natal chart in several different locations. So there's definitely some shifts and changes happening to do with his destiny. There's also through his North Node, the difficulties can have been through his childhood really to where he is. And his chart really is showing that he is going to have a great deal of success moving forward, especially because we had the Great Conjunction, and that was, I believe, towards the end of 2019. He had that Cancer Capricorn axis, so there could have been a lot of things with him either in the media that were happening or in his life very personally. And when we look at the North and the South Node, those are things that are really going on in our life from childhood moving forward. And definitely with that Capricorn placement, it would have been extremely difficult for him, be it that the environment was conducive at home, or be it it's a real survivor kind of energy that does come through with the zodiac. Now at the minute, because we do have Pluto ending its cycle, and that's going to happen towards the end of 2023, it is at a very high degree point at the moment. So the pressure point coming from Pluto is there, being in the house of Capricorn. And with that coming up this week, especially because we have Scorpio transits, it's doing pretty much the same thing. It's all to do with this rebirth. It's all to do with this transformation happening in his life. Now, the other thing that I thought was very noteworthy was his Lilith is in Aquarius. And it does make it very hard for him to let go, and I think it's usually when we're in our earliest stage of life, when we're developing that identity, so to speak. You know, we all have a shadow energy. For Travis, it's in the house of Aquarius. With it being in Aquarius, sometimes it's almost like he's definitely a very caring person. He really wants to take care of people. But again, it's almost having to psychologically put a poker face on at times to make sure everyone's okay. It also can cause difficulties in letting go, letting the guard down, and having to be too many things to too many people. And really creating those healthy boundaries and saying no at times. So that in a shadow effect can be a little bit like Cancer, where it's at that intuitive level, it's having that kind of tribe energy, where not wanting to let anyone down, not wanting to let go of a person, even if they're healthy or toxic. That can be quite problematic. It's also sometimes, you know, really gauging, especially with that North Node in Capricorn, what face to put forward in the public. And it doesn't mean that that person's being unauthentic, especially with any Aquarius placement. Those that are being an Aquarian know that in the early stages, we call the energy the rebellion in society. We really are moving into the age of Aquarius, but it's also where we almost feel like the black sheep of the family. We almost feel we are taking a certain role on in life, and we have to be such. So I do see from that position at times, you know, it's loyalty to the core, but it's even when something isn't so good for us, you know, really having to, you know, maybe put a brave face on and, you know, do what's right in the circumstance. But I do feel emotionally and spiritually, it could have been pretty challenging, especially with heavy placements in both Saturn and in Lilith, and they're both placements in Aquarius. So I do feel he's had an awful lot on his plate, and I do feel he has been looking at the connections around him. I also feel there can be some changes in his contracts really moving forward. We're going to pause the video for a tick, and up on the screen we are going to put the chart, and we're going to talk deeper in this in 2.5. Wow. Okay, so let's have a look at Travis Scott's chart. And I did do this earlier. I had to re-record it. I'm really seeing through his chart, he has some very interesting placements. And we did talk briefly about the North Node in Capricorn. What I am seeing is he does have a lot of subjects coming up in his chart at the moment that are really linking to current astrology. Now, the first point I'll mention is with what happened in the media. He was always going to be back on the media around this time. We are heading to the transit of the eclipse in Sagittarius next month. So already you tend to find with the eclipses that are happening in the nodes, when we're ending that cycle, those subjects are going to come up. And Sagittarius can link to spiritual gurus, it can link to musicians and sports stars. And he does have that at the moment in his 6th house. 6th house can be he works really hard. And I would say over the last 2 years, he may have felt that he was hitting his head against a wall and really trying to have that movement, maybe in career. But I see this really having some sense of forward momentum, really from here moving forward into 2024, really, I'm saying. The other thing I can say is because we have transits currently in Scorpio, it does link to his 8th house placement. It's collectively 8th house, but it's also in his 4th house. So I don't know where the concert ended up being. It might have been, you know, very local. It could have been home-based, but it's also his subjects relating to Scorpio are, you know, he takes it to the core. For him, it hits home. So it did make sense. The other thing I feel is that there is a potential he may be moving home. whether that's going to come up now or it's going to be delayed, there can be subjects to do with home. But again, that can also be renovations, changing, transformations, letting go of certain things to do with family. And again, yes, he is expecting a child. I do feel the child may come earlier. I don't know why I'm picking that, but I am picking there could be a subject surrounding this situation, potentially online, but we'll see. Separately, I also did see his North Node, as I mentioned, in Capricorn. Now, we're going to get into that. Now, the themes in the North Node that, as a human being, he would need to, within his lifetime, develop and grow is the North Node, and that's Capricorn. And what he'd need to move away from, you know, and I beg to differ on some of these things at times. I tend to see in the nodes these days, through studying astrology, is that we become good at both. We're naturally good at one side, which is funny because his South Node's in Cancer. So he's very intuitive. He more than likely an empath, very private person. Personality-wise with the other placements, not necessarily, but through his nodal energy from childhood to now, yes, he would have been. So he's very to the core, being family orientated, and sometimes it can go one side of the fence to the other. It can be very, very loving, very nurturing and excessive, or it can be polar opposite. I also see through these nodes, and we're going to talk about what needs to be released with the North Node. That can be caretaking, codependency, shyness, fear, abandonment, and father issues. So again, I have no idea. I have not studied this situation. I've merely looked at it and I thought, wow, you know, this is really interesting. Because I study the astrology, I knew as soon as he was on the media that he had certain placements, and that was definitely a Scorpio placement, Sagittarius and Taurus. And I was like, because one of the songs I landed on, which I believe is connected to Fortnite, the way the video was styled, it reminded me of the themes that will be coming through in 2022. And naturally, you start to see these really new techniques coming through, especially when it does come to musicians. And his chart's beautiful for this. So I wish him the very best. And I really do feel moving forward, he's going to have a lot of changes. It can be a tough time for the next 4 months. But he is going to find on the opposite side of that there's going to be this massive rebirth for him. And I do see his career being extremely different. I also see his connection going to a deeper level by mid-year next year. But I do see potentially on the children energy, he may not have any more kids for about 2 years. And that's because we're going to be having Scorpio moving into the South Node. So there can be a bit of a delay. That could be due to schedule, due to work. But for some reason, I'm seeing there could be a delay with that. So if they do try during that time, there could be some hits and misses. But at the same time, it's because he's going to be working extremely hard. I also see him going to the top of his level, but he's going to find unique ways to be doing his career as per se. I also feel, again, the 11th house. The 11th house's purpose. There also could be new things that he will be launching in 2022. And that could be fashion. He's got the sun in Taurus. So it will be upgrading his identity, changing, you know, really turning into a version of himself that he recognizes more so. It could also be food lines. Again, Taurus is innovation. It's also for young and old. So it could even be something relating to children, tribe, charities. But again, I do see money coming through the work he's going to do moving forward. I also see great success through his vocals, especially because we have Jupiter and Virgo. Especially because we do now have his 6th house of his hard work he's been putting in, really moving forward now. But he's gone through a spiritual transformation, plus probably would have been a bit challenging during that time of that transition. The other thing I would say is this eclipse can affect him. Wherever we have Leo, we need to be mindful, especially during eclipses. And for Travis, he actually has it hitting his 2nd house. So This can be concerns to do with finances, assets, values, but it can be a confusing time. Again, during the previous concert that he did have that has been in the media, there was an offer towards, really paying it forward to those individuals, which I thought was absolutely beautiful. I also feel emotionally, because he has his Lilith in Aquarius, that's a real difficult placement. He really connects in with people, especially because the South Node's in Cancer. So when something hurts him, he'll never let it go. It's something that, he may really fester on, he may sit with, and it can really hurt him spiritually to the core. The other thing is, I do feel through certain instances, he's going to discover that he is lovable in all his form. And this is a real unique statement. Aquarius placements are hard. Now, he does have Saturn in Aquarius. He's also got Lilith in Aquarius. Now, I'm going to explain the struggle with Lilith in Taurus. Lilith in Taurus can be difficult to set boundaries with people. It also can be incredibly hard to let people go. They could be really toxic for you, or it could be a subject, it could be a wound. I mean, in order to let it go. We also can have outbursts, and then suddenly it's like a person can see our true colours, and we can see our own too. They're the game changers in society. They're the people that fight for people's rights. But it's almost that do I, don't I? What foot do I put forward, especially because you've got the North Node in Capricorn. And I feel the beauty in it is that self-discovery. I do see, again, it's almost that relatable energy I'm physically seeing through here. With the 9th house, I do feel he's going to be very spiritual next year. Now, I do feel his music can come through that way. He could be a huge motivator. He could really be connecting with individuals and doing things that are probably more holistic. The risk is, with Jupiter moving into Pisces and Mars being in Pisces, is he will need to be careful with his well-being. And that's really for everyone collectively. When we did have Chiron and Pisces a few years back, and that was when we were having that Cancer-Capricorn axis, I did find that sometimes we can move into codependency. And one of the warnings for North Node in Capricorn is to be careful of codependency. Now, codependency can be coming down to old habits. It can be okay to pacify a situation because of an emotion. So Pisces is 12th house, it's spiritual. 9th house is also religion, values, spirituality. Again, you could be a game changer as a human being, but it's trying to find that healthy way. It's trying to find something that can mean something spiritual to us without us going crazy, right? So during transits, especially with Mars and Pisces, you can be very protective of individuals. You can be protective of mental health and well-being, but also of emotions. It's important to navigate and master those emotions, to not hold them inside. It could be guided meditation. It can be saying, hey, I'm not working today. So, stepping back and doing something that is healthy, or again, Lilith and Aquarius, it's creating those healthy boundaries. It's like, I need a moment right now. And I think that's going to be one theme that we may see next year. But overall, I do see we really need to pace ourselves. And especially for Travis Scott, I do feel over the next, I would say from mid this month, it's going to kick off. We're going to see a different version. I do feel he's spiritually going to go through a change, especially with his identity, especially with his values and the way he's doing things, because he does have the sun in Taurus. He's also got the 11th house in Taurus. Now, the 11th house, it may be also with the Scorpio transits that he does have someone very close to him pass. And this could be an anniversary, but again, it can also be separately that he moves into having his own label. Sounds bizarre, but it can be something as simple as such. But there is this rebirth happening there. Now, with the transits with Uranus and Taurus, I tend to call them similar to Forrest Gump. It's like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get. It's a partial solar eclipse, but we also come January have it Uranus and Taurus moving direct. So it's both hitting his 11th house and it's hitting his 1st house. So yes, emotionally, spiritually, he's going to need to give himself a little bit of time, but he's also going to find that there's going to be a transformation, and there's going to be large transformations next year for him, especially with the placements of Aries for him, which he does have quite high Aries energy. The second house also can link to stardom. Okay, and he does have real good placements for stardom, but there is this shyness really coming to the forefront here. I do think he needs to pace himself, especially because he did have really Gemini for 2.5 years transiting the 12th house. He can feel a little bit fatigued, but I do see this movement forward being quite spiritual. He may need to also be careful come January with transport and driving, because of the fact he has Virgo in the 3rd house. Now, we are moving into a Mercury retrograde come January, so we do need to be mindful of that. But he may also really be looking at his communication, and I do feel he can be a communicator healer, and I think that can be through his lyrics. I think that can be through his the way he speaks, especially because he does have the 6th house in Sagittarius. He will work very hard for what he has, and he's learned a great deal of lessons, and I think he's going to directly apply it. We're going to jump back on screen now. Okay, now to sum up the energy, in case I've missed anything, I would say at the moment, pretty much moving from here into 2022, it can be a lot of changes and upheavals when it does come to his emotions, definitely with movement, his daily routine. I do see this push-pull, and it's funny because obviously with a new child on the way, he does have Scorpio there. He's also got a subject to do with family going on. That also could be an anniversary, but it's almost like he's being pulled in two directions, to honour commitments and do things. And I do feel there could be some sense of movement and travel, even for his album really moving into 2022, be it there's more coming or there's going to be travel. I do see that on the agenda. I also feel at the minute there can be subjects surrounding both family, home, movement of house, and child. Like I mentioned before, if there is to be another child that comes in, which is a potential, I do feel there can be a bit of a block for about 2 years, and that can potentially be due to the astrology, but it also can be because of other things that are going on in his surrounding life. I also feel a very strong possibility that he's going to be dealing with it differently. Now, it's funny because Scorpio is pretty similar to Mars, but I do see the area of his career growing. I do feel the subjects relating to what happened of late, what was in the media, there can be more information that comes through. But definitely by January, again, there can be more subjects relating to this, potentially that he's directly looking at. And again, I do feel him in his industry and with the things that he's going to be moving through, in the next year and a half, I do see this as a huge game changer for him. I also feel, again, there could be an anniversary. There could be something to do with an inheritance for him, but I feel it's more to do with him actually branching out. And I do actually see there could even be a potential, not that I'm really looking at it from an astrological point of view and a psychic point of view, that he could launch some things on his own as per se. I do wish him the very... Now, the unfortunate circumstance surrounding the situation that happened, because he has both the Moon, Mercury, Venus, as well as, which is all in Aries, which is very scorpionic in nature, and we also have the 4th and the 5th house. I do feel also with Venus retrograding in Capricorn, what I am seeing is a delay in a decision about what the outcome's going to be. This also can affect finances, and I do feel it's really important for both him and his partner at this point to really look after their stress levels, because I do see that being, a huge thing that's coming up. I also feel it really important to protect the energy surrounding little one, and that can be because the Scorpio transit, we did have a new moon. Oh gosh. Okay, new moons can be another baby. but it also can be circumstances surrounding child. So, you know, she really does need to be looking after herself with the stress levels at this point. It also can mean that the child comes early, but there is a caution surrounding that circumstance. I do feel there'll be some stress surrounding this, but it should ease up. I would say what I'm seeing at the moment, astrologically, is outcome energy won't be through till 2022. That could be around March, but there definitely can be more themes surrounding this circumstance in the media. So I will leave you with that. I do wish him the very best. Especially moving into 2022, important to look after mind, body, soul through his astrology. But I do see great success yet to come, and I feel through wounds we do really transform them into you know, really pushing the best foot forward. So I do wish him the very best. My love and thoughts to the people surrounding the situation. Take care.